Whenever there is any talk on African history, what usually comes to mind to most of us is slavery. I believe our African history goes far beyond slavery. Join me as I embark on the journey of our history, our African history that has been suppressed for centuries. The African history is a great one. Unfortunately, very little of it is known to Africans, especially the younger generation. Our generation seem uninterested in our history. But as Marcus Garvey said, a people without a knowledge of their past is like a tree without roots. It is harmful to limit the African history to slavery and assume Africans do not have any institutions, policies, inventions and systems before slavery.
Have you ever heard of Julius Caesar?
Yes, Julius Caesar, yes, I have.
Julius Caesar, yeah.
I have.
Julius Caesar, yeah.
Well, of course.
What of Imhotep?
No, I have no idea. Imhotep? I don't think so.
No, I've not heard of it.
What is that? No. No.
No, I haven't heard of it.
Imhotep is the first medical practitioner, the first doctor, and he was African.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's interesting. So we have to do more about knowing about our own people and the great things that they have done. Okay, all right, thank you so much.
How can we forget this genius, little visor, little short black man named Imhotep that goes back 3,000 years before Christ, that built the step pyramid that is still standing in Egypt today for the third dynasty under Pharaoh Jose, which we call Djoser. And he is registered in history as the first medical doctor and surgeon. But then again, as I said at the outset, our legacy has been hijacked. When Alexander the Greek invaded Kemet, they hijacked just about as much as they could of the good works of Imhotep. And the Greeks changed his name to Aesculapius. And if you do not know, in our medical institutions all over the world today, the oath that is taken by the initiates to be doctors, of course they say the Hippocratic oath, and it is a hypocrite oath because Hippocrates was not the founder of medicine. Hippocrates came almost 2,500 years after Imhotep. But as they swear by the god Apollo, these are doctors to be, they swear by the name of Aesculapius, and that's Imhotep. You understand me? The father of medicine.
Ancient Africa had some of the world's greatest empires, such as the Nile Valley civilization, which lasted about 2,500 years.
Ancient Kemet, now known as Egypt, and Nubia were both ethnic groups of indigenous African origin.
So when we talk about Kemet, what does that even mean? Kemet translates literally to land of the blacks, land of the black people. This is what the Greeks called Aegyptos, what we now call Egypt. So when they're used, they have a need to always say Egypt, ancient Egypt, ancient Egypt. Why don't they use the indigenous term that the people themselves called the land, which was Kemet? They know that if they use that term, that will point you towards the actual history, where Kemet means land of the blacks. As soon as you hear it, you'll say, well, what does it mean? Well, what some of these European pseudo-scholars did is that they would say, oh, Kemet just means the black soil, the earth is black, the ground is black. But that's not the case, because when you look at how the people of Kemet, what we now call ancient Egypt, depicted the word for themselves, they also said Kemet, which means black people. This is something that was uncovered by Cheikanta Diop and also by Theophile Obenga in the 1974 UNESCO conference on the peopling of ancient Kemet and decipherment of the Meroitic script.
Many are unaware that the land of Egypt were originally populated by black Africans.
The genetic evidence, it shows that the closest match likelihood for Ramesses II, for Tutankhamun, for all of these pharaohs, all of these rulers who are called Nesut, their closest genetic relations are found in the Great Lakes region of Africa, Lake Nyanza, that area, Southern Africa, and then also in West Africa. And then far down on the scale, you find those in so-called Middle East of the Arab type. And they also, if you look in the tomb of Ramesses, you will see what they call the Mural of Nations. This is very significant because they depict themselves citizens of Kemet. Ramech is how they write it. And they show themselves as being very black. Then they show the Nehesis, and the Nehesi is the Nubians, what we now know as Nubians, the people of Sudan. They show themselves as being the exact same on the lower rung, and then you also see them as being black on the upper rung, both the Nehesi and the Ramech, the people of the nation of Kemet.
Africa did not only have the world's greatest kingdoms and empires, but also the world's greatest rulers.
So Mentuhotep was one of the rulers of the 11th dynasty of Kemet. So he was also a great builder. He was someone who really helped to stabilize and solidify the power. And again, going back to the iconography, when you look at Mentuhotep, he looks just like any Ghanaian that you would see outside. Very dark, nose very broad, lips very full. That this is Mentuhotep. These are the ancient African rulers. So these are significant in the sense of letting us know that we did great things in the past, therefore we can also do great things in the present. There's a concerted reason, an intentional reason why we don't know these names, but we know Shakespeare, we know Napoleon, all of these people. Because if you knew you did great things in the past, you would know you can do great things now. If you don't think you ever did anything, what do you think you could do into the future? Joseph was also very significant in that he was closely associated with Imhotep. So Imhotep was the very first multi-genius, a commoner who rose to the ranks to the highest position in the land. So Imhotep was the architect and builder of the very first pyramid, a black African just as Joseph. So when you see Joseph, you see him looking just like me, with locks, all of these things. And this is carved in stone so that they could not change it. It's almost like our African ancestors knew that if someone ever tried to change this, we have it in stone. So Joseph is, who that first step pyramid at Saqqara was built for. So he's a very significant figure in terms of this monumental structure that he built.
Amenhotep IV was considered the most remarkable of the pharaohs.
Imhotep was very significant in that he was a great builder. So he is known and he has monuments that are still found in Kemet. He was also the father, along with Queen T, the mother of Amenhotep IV, later known as Akhenaten, the founder of monotheism as it comes to the historical record, in the sense that he showed that all praise should go to Aten, represented by the sun. So Amenhotep was very powerful, very strong, and known for a peaceful and stable rulership.
Women were not left out of ruling. Nefertiti, Queen T, and many others ruled with great magnitude.
Queen T was very important in the sense that she was said to, one, come from the south. You can see that she was very black, coming from the same as the Nubians. Also, she was said to be very influential in the life of Akhenaten, in the sense that she was bringing in concepts and ideas that were found further in the south, in places that we now understand associated with Nubia, Kush, further down into the Sudan.
It is also believed that Christianity was introduced to Africa through slave trade and colonization. Well, this isn't correct.
This Ethiopia, Kush, if you will, and Nubia religion began. The first religious understanding of the great saints of the world was a trinity with Osiris, but the indigenous name was Asar. His sister wife, Oset, came to be known as Isis. Now I want the audience to follow me on this. And of course, to make a long story short, the long and the short of it was that this is where the Trinity began. And they had an immaculate birth of a child named Heru. The Greeks called him Horus, or Hero. Now this Trinity later was hijacked by the Roman Catholics, Rome, the pagans at that time. And what they did, they hijacked it and they painted, if you will, Osiris into Joseph. You know, we have Joseph as the husband of Mary. And they painted Oset, which came to be known as Isis, as Mary. And they painted the baby Horus as Jesus. But of course, when I say they painted them Florentine or European or white. So the evidence is in the Louvre Museum in Paris or Paris. Will show you that Oset and the baby, immaculate baby that was born, Horus, is there dated at 3000 to 2800 BC. So that is a fact, that religion was created by the African or the black race.
Ancient Africans traveled across the globe and contributed immensely to the early civilization of other continents.
You can understand it in very small terms or in much broader terms in terms of the global African presence. There's a scholar, Runoko Rashidi and Ivan van Sertima before him, who are dealing with just this same thing, where you can see jet black Africans as far away as Australia, Tasmania, where you can see images of them before they were exterminated by the whites off of the face of the planet. You can't find one anymore. But those images show you people who look just like people who you find in Ghana to this day. You can find them in places like Mekamui, also called Bougainville. You can find them all throughout Pacific Islands, Hawaii. If you look at the ruler, Queen Liliuokalani, the last queen of Hawaii, she looks just like someone who you find here in Ghana. So far flung on all these Pacific Islands. If you look at original images of the Buddha, you see him jet black and his hair is like mine but twisted into what we call Bantu knots. So you can see all of these images going far back into the past. Another one that I want to make sure I don't forget is the Olmec people. So where you go to Central America, places like Tres Zapotes, La Venta, San Lorenzo, you find these huge heads to the tune of many tons, some 2 tons and 3 tons. I've gotten a chance to actually see one and touch one, where the images of them, they are carved, their noses look just like ours, their lips look just like mine. When you look at their hair is braided just like yours. So when you see these huge, it's almost like your African ancestors knew that maybe someone will ever try to hide your history. So let's not put it on paper so it can be burned. Let's carve it into stone so that you would never forget all of your great achievements. Because perhaps they knew something that we sometimes forget, that when you know you did great things in the past and sailed to these places in ships before Europeans ever knew anything about sailing, before the Moors went into Spain and Portugal and taught them about navigation, maybe someone will try to hide your history from you. So let's carve it in multi-ton boulders so that you would never forget it.
Historical research has proven time, written language, Caesarean operations, and other great inventions emanated from Africa.
We know that chemistry, chem, you understand what I mean, began in ancient Ethiopia. We know that astronomy began in ancient Ethiopia. Now, just to put that in perspective, astronomy, that is to say, the solar calendar was created by the Nubians. And of course, Nubia was the mother of Kemet, and that was, that calendar was 365 days, 48 hours, 0.45, 0.44 seconds, and every 4th year they would add a leap year to it. It was hijacked by Julius Caesar of Rome. Then after Caesar hijacked it in 1508, the Catholic Church, Pope Gregory, he took it, and that's what we're using now for time. You understand me?
They are the inventors of agriculture, science, medicine, dentistry, surgery. They are the builders of religion, the builders of temples. You might say, what happened to these people? Over a long period of time, a big civilization can fall. But we have some hallmarks by which we can dictate, where we can find some of these writings in Greek and Latin before we can go back and translate the hieroglyphs.
At the time of the Roman Empire, and let us never forget the Roman Empire under one of their emperors, Constantine, the Emperor Constantine. They began from their statehood to fabricate a new world order. And I want to repeat that. The new world order was started at this time around 325 BC at the Conference of Nicaea, where they re-established a world order, and the intent was to, if you will, Europeanize or whiteize the whole planet Earth. And all of the documentation, the records and things, they had hijacked it, mathematics, from Kemet in Nubia, astronomy. And so they institutionalized this, and they brought it into a church doctrine. And then it began the denigration of the black race. They began to establish fabricated stories that we were condemned by God because our forebear Ham, the Ham story, that had 4 sons, Mizraim, Punt, Cush, and Canaan. And they began to fabricate stories to the fact that we were a cursed people. And so we had been booted out of those areas, and we couldn't answer to that. We were running, taking to our heels, and the evidence will show historically that we did take to our heels. So then all of a sudden we find ourselves in a situation around, if you will, the 16th, 15th century with Don Diego Azambuja and the Portuguese, who have benefited from all this wealth of knowledge that our people had left. And when I say our people had left, we left from Kemet, Egypt, then we came over to Old Ghana, set up a splendid empire in Old Ghana. The Arabs and the Europeans burned it down by 1076, and it was started at 50 BC. Then we set up, if you will, the old Malian Empire with Mansa Musa. We were selling to the Americas. We established the Olmec civilization there. Then we set up, if you will, Songhai. And all of these empires were attacked and burnt to the ground by Arabs and Europeans. So I'm saying this to say, as a prelude, what was coming now was the trans-Saharan slave trade. That was going to be an impact upon the African race where we still today have not recovered. Then to add insult to injury came the transatlantic slave trade. The Arabs showed the Europeans how to get to us, and this is why the Europeans came 600 years after the trans-Saharan slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade began. And we know that the transatlantic slave trade lasted for a period consecutively 400 years. And according to UNESCO, over 210 million Africans were murdered during that period of time. So we came to a point during the Atlantic slave trade where all learning and productivity of the black race came to a total standstill. That they put the lid on all of our knowledge, stamp approved it and say that they did it, and then doctored on it, and then they sold it back to us, only in the sense to keep us under their control. And that's exactly what is happening right now. We have a Eurocentric educational curriculum, and this is why our children cannot move forward. This is why Africans are leaving the continent today in flight, braving the waters of the Mediterranean, dying in the thousands, dying on the Atlantic, dying in the Sahara Desert, because they believe there's nothing at home. And we have everything in the world at home. And all you got to do is look around you today and see how many Europeans, Chinese, and other foreigners who are coming to our homeland today. And we don't see it because the educational system has miseducational system, has deadened our brains where we cannot see it.
We owe it to ourselves as a people to know our history, more especially when it has been engraved in stone and has stood the test of time.